This is Matt Rosen, and this is The Grit Mindset with me, your host, Matt Rosen. The mission of The Grit Mindset is to inspire and empower our listeners by delving deep into the journeys of those who have faced significant challenges and emerged stronger. Through authentic conversations, we uncover the mindsets, strategies, and lessons that have propelled these individuals to overcome adversity and achieve success. My aim is to provide actionable insights and real-world advice to help our listeners cultivate their own grit and navigate their personal and professional lives with confidence and resilience. Hello everyone, welcome to this week's episode of The Grit Mindset. I'm super excited to have a good friend and my next door neighbor. She's an accomplished energy executive. Her name's Cindy Jaggi. Cindy, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's good to have you on. I believe we'll have to check, I believe this is episode number 60. And I'm glad you made the time to make it over from our neighborhood to be on.
Well, thanks for having me. It's been, we've talked about it for quite a while now, so
Yeah.
so we finally made it happen.
Yeah.
Our schedules worked out.
Yeah, glad to have you here. So you've been a very accomplished energy executive, but I thought for purposes of this audience and knowing you as well as I do, you've got a very inspiring, very gritty story. So I'd just like you to start from the beginning and walk us through a little bit of your life and how you got to where you are.
Okay, well, I guess I would start with, I was born and raised in St. Louis, Missouri, and pretty small town. It was actually Barnhart, Missouri, about 30 miles south of St. Louis. Went to a tiny little kind of rural high school there. Only about 150 kids in my class.
Do you have plumbing? Some people haven't had plumbing on the show.
We had plumbing,
Okay.
yes. Actually, my dad built our house that I grew up in. So he built the whole thing from scratch with his brothers. And
That's cool.
So I can remember them building it. We moved in it when I was 6. So anyway, so always was a bit of an athlete, bit of decent in school kind of thing, like anybody else. Got into high school, had no idea what I really wanted to do. At one point in time, I took a psychology class, and I came home and I told my mom, I love psychology. I was like, this is so good. I want to do this. And my mom said, you don't actually like broken people though. And I was like, oh, that's probably right. You're right. So I ended up, I took chemistry in high school and had a great chemistry teacher, Mr. Nicholas. And he one time pulled me aside and said, Cindy, you're really good at this. You could probably do this. And he's like, you should think about going into engineering. And that was kind of the first plug for it for me.
Did you know what engineering was before that, really?
Not really, no. And so then I ended up, the local junior college had we would call it STEM today, but it wasn't called STEM.
Yeah.
We didn't have that term. But they kind of did a girl, trying to encourage girls to get into the engineering and math and technology and that kind of world. And so they did a whole day on it. But when we first got there, they had a piece of paper, they handed it to you. And on the front side was Bachelor of Science degrees and their starting salaries. And then on the back side was Bachelor of Art degrees and their starting salaries. And so I looked at it and I went do up at the top. And the top one was chemical engineering. And I'd had that little nugget from Mr. Nicholas in my head. And I was always kind of a money hungry kid. I would always work for money. I was
Any
always
interesting
wanting
odd
my
jobs?
yeah. So anyway, so I saw that and I was like, oh, I should do chemical engineering.
Yeah.
And that was it. I went into it. Went to a school in Missouri called University. It was the University of Missouri Rolla at the time. Now that's called Missouri School of Science and Technology. It's 95% engineering. And about 5 guys to every girl go there.
Wow.
Yeah. So there was, I think, something like 28 fraternities and 3 sororities.
Wow.
Yeah. So anyway, went there and then just kind of took off from there. I had some great internships in college. I actually worked for a company called Williams Energy out of Tulsa the summer of my senior year. And that was kind of my first introduction into the energy business. And Rolla had a great recruiting program from all sorts of different companies. I mean, all the major oil companies recruited from there. It's one of those schools that if you're in engineering, you've probably heard of Rolla, but if you're not, you probably haven't. But anyway, so when I graduated, I got a job with ExxonMobil in the Baytown refinery outside of Houston, and I moved and lived there for about 3 years. after school. Met some of my closest friends that I still have
Yeah.
to this day. Obviously, my friend Erica, who I lived with in Houston, got to stay in your guest house when her son went to college, which was super fun. Anyway, so lived with them for 3 years, and then my college boyfriend. He got a job in Fort Worth for a company called XTO.
Yeah.
And so we actually, when I moved to Houston, we broke up for like a full year because I was just didn't want to do the long distance thing. He was supposed to move to Houston and he didn't. And so we broke up for a full year, and he came down to see. He was in town for a compressor training class, as engineers do. And he was in town for a whole week, and he asked me if I wanted to go and have a beer. And so I went and had a beer, and by the end of the week, we were back together and doing the long distance thing. And then another year and a half or so, I moved up here to Dallas, and got a job with a company called was Crosstex Energy. At the time. They had just gone public, small little midstream company. Went to work for them, and that was kind of really, Exxon was great. You're one of, they kind of bring people in classes, of young engineers. So you were in a class of like probably 20 young engineers at the time that, worked on the equipment and all that kind of stuff. And it was a very prescribed job. Exxon they're brilliant at, taking really complicated things and making them very simple for like anybody to do.
Yeah.
So we kind of used to joke that like a monkey with a crane could do your job because it was so like defined.
Yeah.
You're going to look at these pressures, these temperatures, these things, kind of thing. So then I went to work for Crosstex, and it was, they didn't even have like a PO system.
Yeah.
I would literally would make POs on like an Excel spreadsheet for projects and things like that. So but anyway, so I started there and was a process engineer, and then it just really got your hands dirty, really into the equipment and the projects and all the things. And I, a lot of times I was making up like my own job because I'd be like, oh, again, go to this plant and figure out like, how to get the efficiencies up and like what to tweak to get just a little bit more ethane recovery or whatever.
So I'd have to imagine in a lot of these roles, you might have been the only gal at a work site or one of the very few. What was that like?
Yes and no. My first job at Exxon, actually, they had a position they called it the BEO, Basic Equipment Owner, and she was the person that was over like all the operations guys, and her name was Kay Zingrave, and so she was my boss, and then and so Exxon was actually pretty. They had a lot of female engineers, that was kind of it was pretty even there. Most of the operations guys was male dominated for, at the time, and probably still is. But a lot of the management was female. So I guess, it didn't even occur to me at Exxon that I was in like this more like male dominated field. I mean, you kind of felt it more at Rollo when it was like 5 guys to every girl there. But then by the time I got to Exxon, it almost felt more even. So it didn't even really occur to me. And then when I went to NLink was more, obviously it was mostly male, but we ended up having kind of a core group of women engineers there, and we just really kind of all supported each other, and it was great.
Yeah.
So it probably wasn't until I really got to be more even like the executive level that I was really like, oh man, I'm the only one in this room that doesn't have a stay-at-home wife, and that was kind of an interesting revelation of like, oh man, here I am like sitting in this boardroom and everybody here has a stay-at-home wife but me. You're like, wait a minute, none of you are doing your own laundry. That's crazy. So
what was that like for you? Was it difficult, or how did you manage to do that?
I don't know. I guess it was, I always said that it was kind of hard when you're looking around and you didn't have a mentor that looked like you, right?
Yeah.
There wasn't a person that I could look at and be like, okay, I see the path you're on and I can get there from here, so you really had to like almost like hodgepodge like your methods of doing things from different people.
Yeah.
So it would be like, oh man, I really like the way like Michael Blanc treated his people. He was like this guy that was just, he led from the front and was, I mean, he just was very clear with people, had expectations in the way he worked. I really liked the way, this guy was our CEO is Barry Davis. I loved the way Barry Davis made people feel so good about themselves.
Yeah.
He would go, if he was going to go to the field, I'd see him do it a couple of times, but he would go and he would print off like the org chart for the area that he was going to, and he would take notes on his way home of like kids' names or like
Wow.
activities that they did or things like that, so that when he would come back out to the field, he could be like, Matt Rosen, how is Taylor's dance
Yeah.
doing? And he'd be able to blow people away.
People love that when you remember
But I
that.
mean, like people love that, and they felt so special by him. And so I'm not great with names or any of that kind of stuff, but I love the way he did that. So you kind of end up just having to like hodgepodge things together and forge your own path of what like being a woman leader really looks like, because it's not always right in front of you.
Yeah.
And sometimes you're lucky you do find people that you can that are doing it kind of alongside you. But it's not as common, I guess.
Yeah. Well, it's cool that you were able to find some mentors early on and then pick what worked from different folks along the way.
Yeah, it's kind of fun.
Yeah. So you talked early on about, you're kind of money hungry and always looking for different jobs. Can you talk about any odd or interesting jobs you had as a kid growing up in Missouri? And I also want you to talk about your Uncle John, the story you shared with me the other day. So,
Yeah. So, well, yes, I always was doing odd jobs. Always wanted a little money in my pocket, and so I don't know if you actually know this, but my uncle Doug had a paper route, and so when I would be and he would fold inserts. So we always called it folding inserts. I don't know if that's an official like industry term, but it was he would give out thousands of papers, and so you'd have to take all of the like the advertisements
Yep.
and stick them together, and then when he would actually go and like throw his paper route, you would actually have like the news that day and then this stack of inserts, and put them together and roll them and throw them. So as a kid, I would, if I was off school on Monday, my mom would take me over there, and we would spend hours just walking up and down, like sticking these newspapers together.
I did not know that
And
story.
yeah, and then he would pay me. I mean, I would do this for hours, and he would pay me like $5, and I thought I was just doing hot to get this $5. I mean, it was
It's
like
extorting child labor there.
yeah, totally. And my sister and my sisters would come and they'd do it, and they'd probably last about half the time. But I mean, I stayed the whole time, and he'd always give me like a couple extra bucks for staying the whole time. So there's a good lesson there.
It's amazing how many people have been on the show that are successful that had newspaper. That was my first job, delivering the Washington
So
Post.
yeah, but so that was one uncle that I worked for. Then my other uncle that I worked for is my Uncle John, and he was the best. Just an amazing man. When I was 7 years old, he was in a construction accident. He was working in a hotel that was being redone, and he fell 2 stories onto like a sawhorse, and broke his back, and he was paralyzed. Um, um, and he moved back in with my grandparents, lived there. They made the whole thing wheelchair accessible and all that kind of stuff. And he was a construction guy, almost dropped out of high school. I mean, he was the funniest guy,
Yeah.
but he did not take himself very seriously at all in high school. And so here he is, 20 something years old. I think he was like 22, 23, had no idea what he wanted to do, and ended up going back to college and ended up becoming a lawyer. Got married, and he always needed things done. And so he would call us up, and he would have work weekends at his house. And I did so many odd jobs at his house. We built ramps, we poured concrete. I built the banister that went on the ramp of his house, just all in an afternoon. So, I mean, I learned how to swing a hammer. I we were moving him into his house the day before, and we found out that there was hardwood floors under this carpet in his house. And I mean, hardwood floors are so much better for a guy in a wheelchair, right?
Sure.
So I think it was like 10 o'clock at night. We were getting ready to go to bed, and he was like, "Do you think we can take this up?" And we stayed up all night long removing the carpet from his house with me and my cousin Aaron and a couple of his buddies. And yeah, we stayed up, got it up, and the next day we moved everybody moved him into the house, and it was really great. So I would spend lots of weekends down there. And I guess, I say that the whole like working with guys thing never really bothered me because I started probably then. Because it was Aaron and his two buddies would come and we'd spend the weekend and always have a good time.
Yeah. Well, we're going to go to the story where some, I would say, challenging times in your life. How do you think, the time with your Uncle John really prepared you for what was to come?
Man, here's this guy that's in a wheelchair, and yet at the same time he was just so full of life a lot of the time. I mean, he loved to fish. He loved my dad outfitted a four-wheeler for him, and he would go hunting with them, and
awesome.
And just really kind of just really lived his life. And man, I think because he didn't take himself too seriously, he also he would impart these nuggets of wisdom to us in a way in which, like, us as kids, it didn't feel like he was like trying to teach you a lesson. But then at the same time, I look back on some of the things he told me, and it was just like, man, it really just made me made me be the person I wanted to be, right? Like little things, like we were driving one time and we were probably, I was probably like 12 or 13 years old. And he said something about where we were going. And I said, "Oh, I don't know where that road is." And he was like, "Well, you're going to be 16 soon. You need to pay attention to the roads. You need to learn the roads." And this is, of course, before we had GPS. So, now, of course, nobody needs to know the roads. But at the time I was like, oh, he's right. And so by the time I was 16 and I started driving, like, I knew the highway system. I knew the roads. I knew where to go, right? And I mean, I was so much more comfortable going places than a lot of my friends because, like, they hadn't paid attention, right? I knew the roads. So, things like that. He also, he was the one, when I told him I wanted to be an engineer, I mean, he never, he always believed in me. And that was really important. I'll tell you a good story about him. When I guess I had just turned 30 when I got to be a vice president. So that was really fun and cool. I was very excited about having that job. And I was proud of myself, but at the same time, I was also kind of fearful of taking like that kind of executive role. And like I said, I was only 30 years old. I just become a mom. And I was talking with him and I said, and I think I had said like 3 times, like, "I don't know if I deserve it, but, by God, I'm going to take this job and I'm going to, I'm going to work hard at it. I don't know if I deserve it." And he said, "Cindy," he said, "I never want to hear you say that again. Never. You deserve it. They gave it to you because you deserve it. You have worked very hard. You deserve it. Own it." And I said, "Okay, I guess I will." And I never said it again.
Yeah, I like it. He's a wise man.
He was a very wise man, yes. And he was, and I mean, to the very end, he was a very wise person. When he was laying in the hospital, he passed away. He was laying in the hospital, and he had been intubated, and he couldn't talk. And we all of us cousins kind of sat around and joked with him all day. And we had to try to like read his lips. So then they actually did go ahead and they took out the whatever was in his throat that was making it so he couldn't talk. And he called me on Christmas Day. And I mean, he passed away that January. So this is Christmas Day. He calls and he was like, "It's Uncle John, Cindy." And I was like, "Oh my God, I can hear your voice again." And I was so happy. And I just, told him again how much I loved him and how important he was to me. And we're getting off the phone and he said, "Cindy," he's like, "I just have one thing I need to tell you." And I said, "What is that?" He said, "Cindy, you suck at reading lips."
That's hilarious.
Yes. So he was a guy that did not take himself too seriously.
No, doesn't sound like it. Well, talk through, some of the things that you've had to face. I mean, I know when you were in high school, you got in a pretty awful car wreck.
Yeah.
Maybe talk about that first, and then we'll move on to, you're also 10 years cancer survivor.
10 years, yep. It's amazing. Yeah. So in high school, I was on, we call it the outer road in Missouri, not frontage road, but the outer roads in Missouri actually go both ways too.
Right.
So I was on an outer road and a car pulled in front of me and I swerved to miss it and I went into the next lane and hit the car that was coming in. So a head-on collision with I had a Plymouth Reliant. It was brown, two-tone. And I hit like a big Dodge Ram pickup truck. And so he was fine, thank God. But I hit the steering wheel and the steering wheel went through my face, kind of up through about here. So I crushed my maxillofacial bone, which is actually the strongest bone in your body because it's got this curve thing, like an arch, very strong. And most of the time, if you break that bone, you actually snap your neck.
Wow.
So I've never had any neck problems ever. And so I'm so grateful for that. But I had a lot of surgeries of reconstruction. And so it was January 3rd of 1996. I was a junior. And so I spent from then until I think for like my senior prom, I actually did like have like a partial dental thing because we were doing all of the rebuilding of that bone. You couldn't put anything on it. They didn't want any pressure on it. So I went to high school with no teeth for like a year and a half.
That's a tough time of life to begin with. And
It's a tough time of life, yeah. And
I can't imagine with no teeth.
yes, it was. I had some great friends. I had that really just loved me through it, and
Yeah.
really made it okay.
Yeah.
And really helped me. I mean, my sister as well. Annie had already graduated from college or high school at that point, so she wasn't in school with me. But it was a time in which like we got really close because she really helped take care of me and made me feel good about myself,
Yeah.
regardless of the fact that like I looked atrocious.
Yeah.
Um,
What'd you eat with no teeth?
well,
Shakes.
yeah, I did I actually couldn't eat food for a
Yeah.
long time. So I did a lot of like Ensure protein shakes and like we blended a lot of things because another thing is like they didn't want me chewing
Yeah.
at all. So I spent a lot of time with with just a liquid diet out of that time. So
Well, they did a good
it
job
was
of fixing you up for all
yeah,
those
well,
surgeries.
they did. I had several surgeries, and then I actually had to redo all of it, like dental implants again and
Really?
everything. I think when Jillian was like 2, so I was
Yeah.
probably like 32, 33. The original implants were failing, and I had to redo it all. And fortunately, at that point in time, technology had come a long way. I didn't spend any time without teeth at that
Yeah.
point, and so that was really it was a blessing.
Yeah. You don't have to show
um,
up to board meetings
yeah,
without a grill.
it's pretty bad. So yeah. So anyway, so I had to I redid it all, but it worked out, and yeah, I'm
Yeah.
really happy with it now.
Yeah. So you married your college sweetheart, you moved to Dallas, you're rising through the ranks,
Yep.
and then you faced with another personal tragedy.
Yeah. So I don't actually consider it that much of a tragedy.
Okay.
It was a battle and it was
Yeah.
a year, but it was a battle that that I went through. Yeah. So I had breast cancer. I was Saturday night. We had, for whatever reason, we had been home all day, and it was one of those like beautiful like March days right before when you're kind of coming out of winter, and the kids had been outside playing all day. And I think Callie was 2, Jillian was 6, and we had some neighbors that their kids were over, and we had this big green space. And for whatever reason, there was like this huge pile of shoes in front of the door. And so I went to pick up all these shoes, and I'm putting all these in my hands, and of course they all like fell everywhere, and I go and I hit myself. Ooh, probably hit that.
We lose your mic.
So
Still there.
anyway, so I hit myself, and I was like, huh, and it just kind of I felt like a lump, and I went to Ryan and I said, does this side feel different than this side? And he said, yeah, you should get that looked at. And I was like, whatever, I'm busy. I had just made, I think at that point I had just gotten promoted to senior vice president. And so I was very busy. I had 2 kids. I was not in a mode to take care of myself at all. And so I kind of blew it off. I told him, it's probably like a clogged milk duct. I don't know why I thought that, but that is totally what I told myself. So anyway, I was going to go about my business and never do anything about it. And he called me on Monday morning and he said, I just have a bad feeling about this. Will you please go get it looked at? And I was like, oh, I really don't want to do this, but okay, for you, I will do it. He said, I couldn't sleep. Could you please do it? And he's a terrible sleeper, so he always throws that at me. So, so I said, okay. So I went in, I called the doctor and they said, okay, we can get you in tomorrow. And I was like, I have a work trip. I can't do it. I can go Thursday. So I went in, I think on a Thursday, it was March 17th. And I went in and they like, when I saw the picture on the mammogram the first time, I was like, huh, that side looks very different than that side. I mean, you did not have to be a radiologist to tell I had breast cancer. It was pretty obvious. So they went in and then they did an ultrasound. And I remember I looked at the ultrasound and it looked just like when I had the girls and they like, you know, your first ultrasound when you have like the baby in your uterus and it looked like that. And I was like, it's a baby in my boob. Why is that? And the lady was like, you know, kind of, she laughed a little bit, but then, and I was like, seriously, what are we looking at? What is that? And she goes, that's a tumor. They're probably going to want to biopsy this. And I mean, I went from like, well, this is an amazing, like strange looking clogged milk duct to like, oh my God, like, like I have cancer. And so then they sent in this lady whose job it is to tell you you have cancer. I don't know if I ever told you the story.
No.
They sent in this lady. She's a tiny little blonde radiologist, and she comes in and she is like, you have breast cancer. Like there was never like everybody else, like I feel like they get like, okay, well, there's a tumor and we're gonna biopsy it and we'll maybe have cancer, you maybe don't have cancer, we're gonna figure this thing out, kind of thing. She was like real aggressive, like you have cancer. She goes, I'm more afraid that you're gonna die of a heart attack or car accident on your way home. This is not gonna kill you, but you need to get it worked on. I can do a biopsy at 11 o'clock. Can you wait? And I was like, I guess so. Yeah. So I call Ryan, who is also in oil and gas, and we worked with, you know, everybody. It's kind of an incestuous business. Everybody knows everybody. He stands up in a meeting and he says, Cindy has breast cancer. I have to go. And he drives over from Fort Worth to Dallas, and yeah, and they did the biopsy. So this male doctor did the biopsy, and he's doing all the things, and he's like, well, do you have any questions? And I'm like, yeah, I got questions. I was like, why is everybody telling me that it's cancer and that, you know, like, how do you know that it's cancerous and not that it's benign? And he said, well, he said, I've seen enough of these and he goes, it could be fibrous tissue. He goes, but it looks a whole lot like malignant breast cancer. And I've seen a lot of it. And I was like, okay. Like there wasn't any hope.
Yeah. So when you know there's a problem on a rig or a piece of equipment,
yeah, it's like I was like, okay, we know that this is what's going on. So yeah, so then it was right before Easter, and I think on Monday they called me with the results, and I went and you know, at that point in time I started asking all my friends. Of course, Dr. Beth was my good friend and neighbor at the time, and she got on the mom doctor Facebook group and asked everybody what oncologists we should go through. And so we ended up kind of culling this list of oncologists. And I went to Texas Oncology, I went to Baylor, and I went to UT Southwestern, and I met an oncologist at each one. And I realized that it was like, it was just like any other project that I had done at that point. I was like 3 bids and a buy. Interviewed 3 oncologists, and the lady that I met with at UT Southwestern was hands down. She just had the best approach to me. She was just really great bedside manner for me. She was very technical, very you know, kind of went through a lot of what was going on inside my body with me, why it looked the way it did, what she was going to do, all that kind of stuff. And UT Southwestern is just such a great hospital. I mean, you know, that's where Pickle did her residency and everything. So yeah, so it was
where
great.
Dr. Beth went to school.
Dr. Beth went to school, so both of them you know, had gone there. And so anyway, so we ended up picking UT Southwestern. I did a double mastectomy, and then I got to do we did about 3 months worth of chemotherapy. And then I always thought that I was going to have to do radiation, but I thought they were going to tell me like, it's your choice, you know, I'd be the martyr that would go and do it because I needed to.
Right.
And they were like, no, you're going to do it. And I'm sure I remember the radiologist was like, oh yeah, you definitely need to be in doing this. And I was like, I thought I was going to have a choice. I didn't. So then I did another 6 weeks of radiation, and then followed that on by another like year worth. I called 2017 was like the year of my surgeries. I think I did like 9 surgeries that year.
Wow. So
Yeah.
between your face and breast cancer, how many surgeries do you think you've had?
Over 25.
Wow.
Yeah, throughout all the things. Yeah, so I mean, probably like 6 in high school, and then another 3 or 4 when I did the reconstruction again, and then several surgeries around that. And then my mom is a ovarian cancer survivor. And so they were like, we've really, ovarian cancer and breast cancer kind of run together. So they were like, we really want to do a hysterectomy as well. And so I actually had those surgeries in 2017 as well. So
Wow.
yes, it was
Luckily, you had 2 children before that.
yes, I had 2 children before that. We were not having any more children. We always knew we were going to have 2 kids, and so.
Yeah. So what do you tell yourself when you got that first diagnosis and you realized this was not a clogged milk duct?
Yeah, it was not clogged. um, it was so. Like I said, my mom had ovarian cancer, and I saw my mom go through it. And my mom is, she's a very positive person, and I watched her go through it, and she did it. I just remember, she was bald. She didn't get a wig. She was just like, I just am what I am. And so watching her go through it, it was literally like the year before. And actually the day I got diagnosed, when I called my mom to tell her I had cancer, she thought I was calling to congratulate her on being a year out from the end of her chemo, which I did not have that on my radar at all. I'm not that thoughtful. But yeah, so it had only been a year before that my mom had gone through it. So I was like, well, if my mom can like work through it and my mom can do all this, like I'm just gonna try. And I remember like even at my job and stuff, they kept like my boss, Steve Hoppy at the time, he was like, are you gonna take off work? Like, what do you want to do? And I was like, I enjoy my job.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm gonna stick with it. And I said, I'm not gonna kill myself for this place. That's not gonna happen. But as long as I feel like working, I would like to work because it would keep my mind moving and kind of moving forward. And so that was really the attitude that I took with it. And I like to joke that Ryan actually took off more work than I did when I was going through chemo. So my first round of chemo, Jillian was doing the dance recital at Sote. And I know your girls did Sote for a minute, right? Before they did Oak Cliff Dance. Yeah, so that week you go every day, and I did chemo, and then I was like, I'm taking my girl, and we're doing the dance recital practice that night, and the smell of hairspray and chicken nuggets like really did me in. I had a rough time. I went home and got very sick, and then had to battle through like that weekend. And then, you only did treatments every other week. So then the next week I kind of felt okay. And, I shaved my head and did all that kind of stuff. And then, so the next time I went in for chemo, Ryan took off work we always took off work the day that we did chemo, or we worked while I was like literally hooked up to the thing, from the hospital. But then he took off the next day. He was going to stay home. And I think the kids have off school, and he told our babysitter not to come. And I was like, well, if I feel okay, I'm going to work. And so he was like, well, you can't because like the girls are going to be here. And I was like, well, I guess you're staying home with them. And so he took off that day for my chemo, and I went to work. And so that was it. And then the only other day I ever took off was like the actual day I had the chemo.
So between, getting the diagnosis, battling, through chemo and through radiation, you kept, a full-time executive career and managed 2 children.
And managed 2 children, yeah. Actually, I had Jillian cut my hair, which was one of the funniest, most fun experiences ever.
And she loved that.
She loved it. And Ryan actually was the one that came up with that idea when it first happened. Like, because of all the things, you're just kind of, I was vain about my hair. And I didn't want to lose my hair. I was very worried about it. And that was like the big thing. I guess I probably should have been worried about like getting sick, but I was worried about my hair. And he cried about it and all that kind of stuff. And Ryan even said, Ryan said, you should let Jillian cut your hair. And I was just like, I don't know that I can do that. I really don't know that I would be strong enough to do that, right? And then the date came, and I'd gone in kind of before I did chemo for the first time. I'd gone and gotten a really cute pixie cut, which I loved my pixie. Ryan didn't, but I did.
I think that's when I
Um,
met you. You had kind of
yeah,
a pixie cut.
I had it for a long time.
Yeah.
And so anyway, so I'd gotten my pixie cut, and but then I'd gotten the chemo, and it it was falling out. Like it was, like if you touch your hair, it's like 10 hairs were just, and it was just everywhere. It's kind of gross. And so I came home that night from, I think I'd actually had like a PTO meeting or something I had to go to, because I was also PTO president at the time, as one does, and I didn't quit that either. So anyway, I came home from that, and I think Callie was already in bed. It was probably close for Jillian to go to bed, and I was like, "All right, Jillian, let's do it." I was like, "You want to cut my hair?" She was like, "Yeah, yeah, I do." So we went out to the driveway and we sat there, and she cut my hair, and I have pictures of it. And then when she was finished with it, we shaved it, and
Oh,
that
that's
was
awesome.
it.
I've never seen those. You have to show those to me sometime.
I mean, not to brag, but it was like a real cut, real short cut like that. I kind of look like Sinead O'Connor. Yeah, so it's pretty funny.
Well, you're on the grit mindset. Obviously, you shared a lot of great stuff, but I always like to ask every guest, what does grit mean to you?
Oh man, I think that. Of course, I read the Angela Duckworth
Yeah.
Grit book, which is a great book.
It is.
Love it. And I think that her definition is pretty good, which is just, I think grit is just not stopping,
Yeah.
right? I mean, you don't quit, right? Like,
Yeah.
or, I guess it's the constant pursuit of like, you stop when you're old, right? Like, it's kind of the if I have to, I'll quit, but I'm gonna have to have something that's gonna make me quit.
Yeah.
And I think that's what grit is. The grit is saying like, I'm not gonna quit until I absolutely have to. I won't kill myself for it, but by God, I'm gonna come close.
Yeah. We've definitely demonstrated that. Well, you've definitely demonstrated a lot of grit. And, before we close out this episode, I want to talk about the current situation you're managing with your husband and his health condition. Can you talk a little bit about that and how everything you've gone through has either prepared you or readied you to deal with what's happening today?
Yeah, that was really interesting. So, referring to the fact that my husband has transverse myelitis, which is the myela is the sheath covering your nerves in your spinal cord, and so transverse across his spinal cord, his immune system attacked that myela. So, if you think about a bundle of cords all put together, now they are cross communicating, and so he has lots of he can't feel his feet. From his kind of waist down, he's basically paralyzed, but he can walk. So he had to relearn to walk though. We actually took him into UT Southwestern on a Tuesday. It was Callie's birthday, May 28th. We took him in, and he ended up spending 3 weeks in the hospital with steroids and plasmapheresis and all this kind of stuff. But we took him in on Tuesday. He walked into the hospital, just kind of having like some numbness and pain in his legs, just not really sure what was going on. And by Thursday, he was completely paralyzed, could not walk. I had mentioned, in fact, my Uncle John was a paraplegic, in a wheelchair bound. And so, I mean, I was running through every project I had done with him in my life, and like trying to figure out where I was going to put like an elevator in our house so he could get to like the game room upstairs, and where the ramps were going to be, and how we were going to, how I was going to really handicap accessible our house for him, because I did not know that he was going to walk. And it was kind of almost felt like a really cruel joke that God was playing on me in that moment, because my Uncle John had died in January and this was in May. And so I was just like, man, I just wanted to call him and talk to him about it, and like really like, um, have him tell me it was going to be okay.
No.
Sorry, I get choked up thinking about it, but it was just such a scary, scary moment. And so yeah, so then, they told Ryan at that point in time, they were like, what you get back over the next 6 months to a year is what you're going to get back.
Yeah.
And that man threw himself into therapy. And he was in the hospital, but he was on a walker. Towards the end of his hospital stay, he could walk around, and he was going through some therapy there and all that. And at that point in time, we were talking, and they wanted him to like be at UT Southwestern at like 7:30 in the morning for therapy, a couple days a week. And we just kind of looked at it and we were like, you know what, we got money, we ain't got time. Like we're gonna throw the book at this. And so we ended up hiring a private physical therapist to come to the house, and he worked hard
Yeah.
to teach himself to walk again. And probably within a month or so of him coming home from the hospital, he was able to walk without a cane.
Yeah.
He still has pretty wiggly, drop foot, that kind of thing. But yeah, um, uh, he he does a lot of stuff, and I mean he's pretty gritty in his own right
Absolutely.
to do as much as he does. He likes to pretend he doesn't like to go on adventures with me, but by God,
You drag him along.
I drag him along to a lot of
Yeah.
adventures. So
Well, you guys have had a lot of success in business, but also had to manage a lot, just from your personal lives. You know, you've got, two great kids who I've gotten to know well. I would think grit is instilled in them, but if not, how do you think about instilling grit in your kids?
My girls are gymnasts, so there's like probably, I mean, that's like kind of the definition of grit,
Yeah.
right? I mean, I always say in gymnastics that it is a sport about falling down a lot and getting back up.
Yeah.
It is constant falling and trying again, constant over and over and over again, to get to do those skills, right? And so I always tell them when they complain about it, can I skip gymnastics tonight? I say, it's fine. Yeah, you don't have to do gymnastics. But if you're gonna be a gymnast, you go to gymnastics. And they always say, I don't want to quit gymnastics. I'm like, I know. Well, then you're
then you
gonna
gotta go.
then you're gonna go to gymnastics. I think that having something like that that they go to,
Yeah.
and they have to pick themselves back up. And I mean, we've had bad days, right? You
Yeah.
have really bad days in gymnastics, and really hard days. And then when something clicks for them and it works, it's so fun to watch them be successful in it.
Yeah.
And that's really such a joy to see. So I guess I wouldn't say that I did. I wanted them to do hard things, right? I
Yeah.
wanted them and they kind of picked the hard thing that they've done, and it's fun to watch them do it.
No, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, as we're kind of wrapping up the show here, is there anything we didn't cover that you wanted to, or any final words of wisdom you'd like to share with our audience?
Man,
Covered a lot of ground.
we did cover some ground. And I guess I would just say, my piece of advice to people in management is to find the good in people, right?
Yeah.
So like everybody's got a little bit of good and a little bit of bad in them. I think the secret that I've found for myself is figuring out what is the best part of somebody and then being able to utilize that, right?
Yeah.
So, if I think about like Pickle.
Yeah.
Pickle is loyal to a fault,
Yeah.
right? Like watching her take care of her dad. I tell her all the time, if I go in the hospital, I want you to take care of me.
I wanted to do the same.
You're a lucky man with that. But whoever it is, right? You
Yeah.
like find the good in people and then use that in them, and it'll make them feel good about themselves, and make you feel really good about yourself as well.
Yeah. Well, it's great. Great wisdom. Thank you so much for coming on the show, sharing your story. You're glad to have you as a friend of the family and
Yep.
next door neighbor. And for the folks listening out there, hopefully you take away some nuggets of someone who's very accomplished and been through a lot and gets up every day to fight again. So, Cindy, thanks for being my friend. Thanks for coming on the show. Till next week's episode of The Grit Mindset, this is Matt Rosen, your host, signing off. Stay gritty.